fighting for us. Who can stop the work of your hand? Come on. We've seen redemption at the heartbeat of our church. We've seen addiction broken. So goes, how we doing this morning? Come on. You saw us running, but you wouldn't let us go. 'Cause you saw our story ending in the arms of your son. So we'll run into the arms of your son. Hey, so we rejoice, for you have come. Emmanuel, Emmanuel, our King has come. You came to us. Come on. We sing, we shout, 'cause in our city you have been our God. You came to us. We sing, we shout, 'cause in our city you have moved our God. You gave to us. Morning, Suncoast. When the road runs dead, you can see a way I don't. And when it makes no sense, you say that's what faith is for. When I see a flood, you see a promise. When I see a grave, you see a door. And when I'm at my end, you see where the future starts. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. You've been good on every promise, from Eden to Zion, through every dead end and out of that grave. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. And when my world's on fire, I know that I'm in your head. And when my heart gives away on your love, I will stand. Nothing has ever won't surprise you, and nothing has ever made you flinch. When it all shakes out, darkness don't stand a chance. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. You've been good on every promise, from Eden to Zion, through every dead end and out of that grave. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. You pulled my heart from Egypt. You carved a road through sin. Unchanged, endless grace. The story ends in you. And when we crossed that Jordan, looked back where we've been. My heart changed through endless praise. The story ends in you. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. You've been good on every promise, from Eden to Zion, through every dead end and out of that grave. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. I know you will.
Let it rain in the dead of night, while the world comes apart. You keep watch when my vision is blurry and my thoughts run afar. You step in when the wolves come prowling and the thieves come to steal. 'Cause you don't sleep when my world spins in darkness and I can't tell what's real. Show me your heart, 'cause I need a fire. it's all I've got, and my life depends on you. See it all, what's impossible to this love I have in you. I'll sing your praise like it's all I've got, and my all belongs to you. Oh, what
morning. It's good to see you today, and I've been gone, haven't been up for 4 weeks, and people say, man, that's a long time. Who are you? My name's Larry Baucom. I'm the lead pastor of Suncoast, but before I begin, let us give it up for Pastor Troy. A great job he did summer at the movies. Great job. He's in Texas today with his kids, watching online. We're glad that he could tune in for that, so I'm so glad that you're here. Becky and I have been, it's been COVID and all the things that happened for a couple years. We haven't traveled as much, but this year we decided to travel a little more. So we were gone and went up to the Arctic. You say, well, what do you mean all the way to the Arctic? I'm talking about if the Arctic Circle is at 66 degrees latitude, we really went about 1,000 miles up to 82 degrees, beyond where human beings live. Polar bears, walruses, whales, all those kinds of things. And 2 years ago, we were down at the south of South America, almost Antarctica. So 200 miles, I was only 200 miles from Antarctica. This time I was in the Arctic. But just 200 miles, and I could have the badge bipolar. So maybe next time I'll get that. But some of you haven't been there and you have the badge. I understand. So it's been fun. Life is good. Today we're talking about so many different things as we launch a new series. And this is called the Seven Signs. It's interesting to study the book of John, one of my favorite books in the Bible. John really writes from a time of thought. He's a young guy that became an old guy, and he writes after a lifetime of thinking about all the impact that Jesus had upon him. And when he talks about signs and wonders, he does that rather than talk about miracles. The miracles in other Gospels are called signs in John. Why? Well, in this passage of Scripture, John tells us his intention. He said, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his messianic light or his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So signs for John is simply to open the eyes, letting you see that his disciples had to first understand who he was, and they did. So he starts with telling us a story about a wedding. Have you seen the most outlandish weddings? Have you been to some that have just been over the top? I mean, there's weddings that are scuba diving weddings. They're underwater and they write their vows on a little whiteboard underwater. Do you take him? Bubble, bubble. And then there's the skydiving weddings. They do it while you're, I got to tell you, the skydiving weddings, one thing I like about them, they're a limited amount of time. You can't go too long on those weddings. When I pastored in North Florida, one of the local radio stations thought it'd be a good idea for advertising to put a big billboard on one of the main highways going into Tallahassee, and it was called the Chapel of Love. They talked about a chapel of love. They're going to give away a wedding. Well, some friends of mine won the wedding because of their hardship, and they got to be married, all expenses paid, but here's the catch. It's at 8 o'clock in the morning on rush hour, and they put you in a scissor lift and lift you up to this arch that's on the billboard, and you have to do your wedding there. I was there. They asked me to do the wedding. I politely said, I'd rather just watch it. So I got to watch the wedding and part of the whole festivities and everything, but I thought, this is an outrageous wedding. I performed some weddings, though, that have been out of the norm. For example, I was at a Players Theater here in Sarasota, and one of the ladies who was the stage director asked me to do the wedding for her and her husband, who was the leading member of the cast. So she said, I want to stage it as a wedding within the theater, as if a theater's going on. I said, well, what does that mean? She said, I'm going to go. She had a headset like this, the whole wedding. She was the stage director as the bride in the wedding. Her husband-to-be, the groom, was in flannel shirt, and he was part of the performance cast. He was the lead actor. And for me to be in the wedding, I had to wear a flannel shirt and jeans, so I went in as one of the farm boys on this whole thing. And eventually I did the wedding. I thought, that's pretty innovative, amazing. I did another wedding, more outlandish, at Siesta Beach in July at noon. Formal. Black tuxes for everyone. I remember sitting in my car in the air conditioning until 12 o'clock, and at 11:59, getting out of my car, I'd parked close, and going up there, and I walked across the bridge in the full sun. Here are all the people there. There's a harpist playing. People in their black tuxes, and we're waiting for all the ladies to come in. One, sweating, sweating. The second one, sweating, sweating. The third one, sweating, sweating. Finally, the bride, 45 minutes later, she shows up. Some German guy was walking behind me, pacing me in a Speedo, saying, Val, do you think she's going to show up? I go, I don't know. Need to not be in the wedding photos, dude. You know, just. And then 2 years later, they got divorced. 1 year after that, she called me and said, Pastor Larry, would you do my next wedding at Siesta Beach? I'm not going to comment on how that went. But I did put some caveats. It had to be 5-minute window and I was gone. Anyway, another story. But truth be told, most weddings, as lovely as they are forgettable. You know what we remember? Is the outrageous things. What we remember is the crazy things, except your own wedding. And I know you remember your wedding, and you should. That's fine. But we remember those that are on TV or on the beach or on a billboard. But unforgettable weddings usually have an unpredictable moment, like a bride that faints, or the maid of honor that trips in the mud before she comes in, or the groom that doesn't show up, or the smiling pastor who calls them by the wrong names through the whole ceremony. We remember those. When Becky and I got married over 46 years ago, we had a flower girl. Now she's pushing 50, but 2-year-old flower girl that poured out all her flowers at the altar. She pours them all out, and then she takes her shoes off. And she smiles and looks at everyone. And when we think about our wedding, what we remember most is not that was annoying, but that was endearing. The things that usually don't go well are the things we remember most. And when I counsel people for weddings, I say, look, if you want a perfect wedding, you won't have it. But just remember, some things are going to happen that you don't expect. Embrace them. They become part of all the dynamic of love in a wedding. So it's usually at a point of embarrassment or awkwardness, but we still remember. Today I want to point out to you from a biblical story an unforgettable wedding. It's found in John chapter 2. Let's look at the passage. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some of it out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first, and I would say, of the 7 signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So I read this story, and I understand the story, and I've read it, and I've taught from it many times. My first question that I ask when I read this is, why is this story in the Bible? And verse 11 answers that. Here, Jesus gives his disciples a glimpse of God within him. They say, first you could see his glory. By that they mean the Messiah, the light of God. And they began to put their faith in him or their trust in him. Jesus, his mother, and his friends attended an unforgettable wedding at Cana. I've been there. I've been to Cana in Galilee. It's a little town in the area of Galilee. They actually have a place where, because of this, you can still get married in Cana of Galilee if you want to. They have the little shops that sell wine from Cana, Galilee. So if you want some of the Jesus wine from Cana, Galilee, I don't think it's probably the real stuff. But it's still there. And why is this story here? Well, it's here, but people are still talking about it. Apparently, it was just your typical traditional wedding celebration with an average, pleasant reception. And everything's going wonderful. It's normal. No one remembers it. until the wine gives out. See, the custom for a wedding reception in Galilee, the better wine was served first. Makes sense when you think about it. When your palate is fresh and expectant, and then after a few glasses of wine, who cares? Both the guest and their taste buds are dull. And typically, give them the good stuff first. When their taste buds are dull, bring out the cheap stuff. But to run out of wine at a wedding was an unforgettable humiliation in its culture. It was a problem for the host if it wasn't quickly fixed. It could have been an ongoing humiliation in the community. For example, 2 years ago, remember when we did that wedding here? Remember? He ran out of wine. How embarrassing. Because, you know, weddings like that, they don't last for a day. We have weddings that are short. And how many people like short weddings? Just curious. I don't like short weddings. I usually say short wedding, long party. Short ceremony, long party. Weddings that I do last 10 minutes. But the party lasts for, hours and hours. But do you know what they would do? They'd have a wedding that would last a short amount of time, and they would party for 1 week. No, thank you. I'm still trying to get over the Siesta Key wedding. Can you imagine a whole week? I mean, surely they'd have places you could go shower. Maybe not. But remember the wedding at Cana of Galilee? They ran out of wine. Picture this. There's a stressed out host trying to find more wine, grabbing servants who are looking at him with fear in their eyes because someone had created a big oops. But for whatever reason, Mary, Jesus' mother, gets involved in the wine problem. And we look at this, we don't know why Mary's involved. Maybe she was a relative of the wedding. Maybe she thought weddings were worth celebrating. But we can almost hear Mary saying, don't worry, I'll talk to my son. He can fix about anything. So Mary comes to Jesus, and she tells him, they're out of wine. Jesus replies, woman, why do you involve me? I'm not ready to launch my ministry. My time has not yet come. Why are you pushing me? I don't like it, Mom, when you push me. And what he really was saying, woman, it's not your responsibility. Don't get involved in this. I tried this once when Becky asked me to do something. I said, woman, why do you involve me? Gentlemen, I do not recommend that answer. It's better just to say, oh, whatever you need, I'm there. They're ancient stories of Jesus as a young boy. Now, these are not credible stories. They're not biblical stories. But there is one book called The Arabic Gospel of the Infancy of the Savior. And it describes how Jesus, as a young person, helpful son, worked in the family carpentry business. And in the story, it says every carpenter knows the rule, measure twice, cut once. Because if a board's too short, you can't stretch it to fit. Not then, not now. And I started to say not ever, but according to this, unless your son is Jesus. According to this writing, the young Jesus worked with his carpenter dad, and dad was not a very good carpenter at all. And people come pick up whatever he was making, and it was the wrong size. And according to this book, which was often. And Joseph would ask Jesus to fix it. And according to the tale, Jesus would wave his hand over the finished piece, miraculously stretching it or shrinking it to the right size, satisfying the father and the customer. But the reality is we don't have information about Jesus growing up, even as a young adult. We don't know if many knew who he was or what amazing things he could do. Regardless, his mother knew there was something unique about her son. He could fix things like no other son, and she suggested Jesus that he fix the wine problem. In a way, even though it was Jesus who performed this first miracle, it was Mary who offered his services. You could say it was Mary who saved the day. But changing the water into wine, what does that look like? How is wine made? I talked to a regional wine rep who attends here, and he began to tell me the process of growing grapes in Napa Valley in Oregon, and how that's a certain amount of water has to be there, the right soil density, the fact that it's on a hillside, the water drains off the roots, or if it's in a lowland, a different type of grape. And then you take that and you blend these wines, and maybe you put them in French oak barrels, and you cure it for a long time. Very complex, time-consuming process, unless you're Jesus. He made the miracle. The miracle made it look simple. Nearby were 6 25-gallon ceramic jars filled with water. And they weren't completely full. He said, fill them to the brim. Then take a pitcher, dip it in there, take it to the wedding coordinator, let him taste it. And suddenly there was 150 gallons of excellent wine. Plenty of wine for the rest of the reception, plenty of wine for a party that would go day after day after day. Certainly the guests tasted the quality improvement. Everyone serves the best wine first, then the inferior wine later, but you save the best till last. What does this mean? It means that the wedding at Cana of Galilee, where Jesus revealed his glory or claimed his messiahship, was the first place he began to declare that. Do you know the first miracle that Jesus ever recorded was at a wedding at Cana of Galilee? So what does it mean to us? It means that if Jesus can be the one who creates wine out of the ordinary water, he can create something wonderful out of other ordinary things, like you and me. It's a miracle, but it's the miracle of transformation. As one wife put it after her alcoholic husband encountered the power of the resurrected Christ, she said, Jesus didn't change the water into wine, but in my family, he changed the wine into furniture. He changed the wine into food. Money that had been spent on addictive substance was now being spent on the family. Transformation can turn the sour into sweet, or bitterness into peace, hatred into love, anger into joy. The wedding at Cana of Galilee is a story. It's really not about the wedding, and believe it or not, it's not about the wine. It's a story symbolizing so many things. New transformations, new beginnings. And because of this story, the disciples put their trust in him, and so should we. So there are three features in the story. The first is the wedding itself, the banquet. The second is the interaction between Mary and Jesus, which I love that interaction. And the third is replenishing the wine. So I want us to examine the passage in just a few minutes. But, understand this wedding was a week-long wedding, ultimate failure, interruption, problems, embarrassment. Mary, the mother of Jesus, approaches him and puts the problem on his shoulders. And he begins to change the circumstance with what is at hand. So let me give you three thoughts today. And here's the first one. Jesus often begins with the ordinary. The meaning behind the scenes can be uncovered as we examine the situation. Now, there's so much symbolism in John. John was a teenager with Jesus, maybe a young adult, 20 years old, and now he was writing when he was in his 90s. He was an older guy, writing after a life of reflection. And what he really is noticing, there's 6 ordinary stone jars. When he uses a number, you have to find out what he's talking about. And 6 is a number for humanity, for mankind. 7 is the number of perfection. So he's really saying, Jesus said, take the ordinary, we're going to make it extraordinary. And what was the water used for in these jars? When feet were muddy, they would wash their feet. They had dirt roads. They didn't have pavement. They had sandals. They didn't have Nike shoes with socks. And their feet were clean. As a point of courtesy, feet were washed. Hands were clean between each course of the meal. Now, 6 stands for ordinary, as I said, and 7 stands for perfection. Some scholars think that the 6 stone pots represented the older Jewish order of thinking. How many gallons would that be? 6 times 25, 150 gallons. Fill the jars to the brim. Once they're full, transformation takes place. Let me segue for a second. So many times we want things to happen in our lives, but we're not full enough for the transformation to happen. Some will say, I just want a little bit of faith, a little bit of Jesus, a little bit of God, but I want my whole life to be transformed. But I will tell you this, when you're filled to the fullness, that's when life begins to change. He turns the water into wine, the best wine. What does it mean to me? If God can use ordinary water jars to perform a miracle, then he can use me. Despite my failures and imperfections, God can use me to meet the needs of others. Jesus still sees the potential in me, which leads to number 2. When the wine runs out, do not panic. So Jesus often begins with the ordinary. When the wine runs out, do not panic. When the wine ran out, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to the family. Now, let me ask a couple of questions, not to be answered out loud. But have you ever embarrassed your family? Have you ever been embarrassed by your family? What good is a family if you can't embarrass them? Right? I mean, I have a family. I have a large family. I have a mother that's 96 years old. I mean, she's old. She's here. Why not embarrass her? Well, let me rephrase that. She's not here. Do not talk to her after the service because she just might embarrass me. I remember the time I learned this insight. Why is it a family can push your buttons like no one else? The answer? Because they installed them. Why is it I can push my younger brother's buttons like no one else? Because I installed those. We are often in a crisis when we have failed in the eyes of others. When we have a problem, we don't see an answer. There's a sense of abandonment. We're in crisis when my job is no more. My children have failed. You know, there are times in this life we find that the wine has run out. We're out of luck. Too many people showed up at the feast. We're embarrassed. Someone's pushing our buttons because we didn't plan well. We failed. Which leads to a key question today. This is the most important question. What do we do when our wine fails? What do we do when all of a sudden we're in a circumstance and we run out? Our resource. 37 years ago, I had a brother that committed suicide. Health problems, family problems. He ran out of wine. 2 years later, his second son, who was about 21 years old, had a family argument, and he took some pills and drank some alcohol and did not wake up. So I lost a brother and nephew within 2 years. In the last 10 years, I lost a nephew, a niece, my brother, my mother-in-law, for a variety of reasons. But it seems like when you lose people that you love, there's something that hurts deep in your heart. What about you? Have you ever reached a situation where you feel like you ran out of wine? You're out of wine, you don't know which way to turn, but you know your heart aches. It happens when a father or mother find out their adult child is a crack addict. It happens when a young couple lose their child by miscarriage or cancer. It happens when a family loses their source of income in the terrible economy. It happens when a young wife whose husband just leaves for more party time. What about that wife whose husband died? She feels all alone. She runs out of wine. In the last week, the last 7 days, I know of 2 husbands, fathers. One is 40 and one is 30. They've been diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer. One has less than a year, the other has less than 2 years. And you go, what do you do in that crisis? They've run out of wine. All of a sudden, the unexpected happens. This is not what they planned for. Their hearts are broken. Their families are grieving. What do we do when we run out of wine? That's a good question. Which leads me to this thought. Point 3, when we are thrown off balance and out of wine, would someone please bring Jesus? I want to share with you 3 things that I've discovered help me when the wine fails. Do I hide? No. Do I withdraw? No, but I want to. Do I run away? No. So what do we do when the wine fails? First suggestion is go immediately to the source of life. We fret, we worry, we try to plan, we agonize, our hearts are broken. But can I suggest to you that the best place for you and I to go when the wine fails in our life, relationally, in our family, in our health, we need to go immediately to Jesus. Jesus obviously was the solution for Mary. He's the only one that she trusted to handle the problems. And his response here is interesting. It's not one of disrespect. But woman, why do you involve me in the problem? My experience is that we eventually go to Jesus. What I don't know is why we don't go sooner. When all else fails, pray. I go, man, that's just backwards. When it happens, begin with a prayer. My recommendation is immediately take your issue to Jesus and let him work in your heart and life. The second thing I suggest, not only go immediately to the source of life, but tell God the problem. Do you know people come to church with problems on a regular basis? And it's okay because this church, our church, is a hospital, not a courtroom. But the real help for our problem is the presence of God. Jesus said to those around him, the kingdom of heaven is within you. What he's saying is God is already in you. The source of help is already there. You don't have to go very far, but you'll find him. Folks, in the last couple of years, we've lived through a pandemic. It's a different world. Counseling is at an all-time high. People need help, but a good counselor will help you not only see the circumstances on the outside, but help you reflect and work on the issues on the inside. So go to the source of life, tell him the problem, and trust God to handle it. Mary said these words, you just do what he tells you to do. And I love the fact that Mary didn't stand around and micromanage Jesus turning the water into wine, like some moms would do. But problems occur when you and I attempt to turn water into wine. I grew up in the South, where you can't turn water into wine, but occasionally farmers would turn corn into alcohol. And I can assure you the government is very interested when that happens because they want the tax base on that. But sometimes we look around and we see some jars and we actually think that we can solve the problem ourselves with just adding more water. We try to perform our own miracles, and the result is you turn water into water. Can I suggest you trust God? Expect great things. Be ready for great things. So here's some practical tips to help us keep on balance. Some practical tips that help us try to give up trying to control everything. Number one, and I practice these, have a daily time with God. Take time for prayer and meditation. Take the issue to God. Talk to him about it. Have a set time every day, but I'm busy, I know. And you'll never see the extraordinary transformation happen in your life until you take some time to reflect before God. The second thing I suggest you do, and I do this, is learn to give back. Sometimes it's not about me having my water turned into wine for me, but it's about me being available and letting God use my resources to help someone else. Learn to give back to God. Be willing to be used of God. And lastly, become part of a group. Become part of a community. See, in community, we find healing. You go to a wedding, there's a community. You go to a party, there's a community. You come to church, you're part of a community. And through a community, we're able to do things for people that we could not do individually. In community, we find healing. How does this start? We begin by opening our hearts to the one who made the water and the wine. So how's your resources today? So I've got plenty of money. How's your emotional resource? How's your anxiety resource? How are you dealing with all the issues of life? Open up your life to God. He's already within. Let him fill you to the brim. He's the one who transforms water into wine, the ordinary into the extraordinary. Can I pray for you? Father, in a moment like this, we hear this ancient story and begin to realize that some of us are out of wine. Some of us came here today and we're deplete, we're empty, we're embarrassed. We don't have the answer. But Father, as we bring our needs to you, would you begin to work in our hearts, the jar in our heart, and fill it with all the love of God that's available. And Father, for others who come here today, our resources are abundant. We're feeling good. Our lives are overflowing with all the blessings. Would you put us near someone who needs you? And may we be the source of strength for them as well. Thank you for your love, your presence. Thank you for your overcoming and overwhelming spirit that lives within. We pray in your name. Amen. Would you stand, please? I'm going to tell you a story in closing. It's a story that happened to me when I ran out of wine. So let me tell it to you. 25 years ago, God was in the process of changing me. I committed my life to an hour a day for one whole year. I wanted to have this connection with God like I'd never had before. And after a year of prayer and meditation and fasting, after one full year, I should have been the most spiritual guy around. The day that I finished, I resigned my church. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. Emotionally, I was drained. Mentally, I was empty. I could no longer lead in my current denomination. What happened really was I had run out of wine. I resigned and I moved to another city. The process of healing was not immediate, but over several months, my heart began to sense healing. On Easter Sunday, 1998, Jesus came to where I was and filled my heart with all his presence and turned the water into wine. He took my ordinary heart, filled it to the brim, and transformed it. And in that moment, Suncoast Community Church was born. We started this new church that would reach the unchurched. My heart was expanding. I was growing. Did I have lots of degrees? Of course. I had more degrees than a thermometer. But God was doing something real in my life that I'd never experienced before. My heart was growing. My connection with God was changing me. The presence of Christ began to flow from within. And we launched this new community called Suncoast. People showed up. Why? Because the Spirit of Christ is here. It's authentic, it's simple, it's trusting, it's accepting, it's community. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. See, God as a source of life is in here. He lives near the water jar of our heart, and he's ready to transform the contents into something more alive and more amazing. And today, if you came in broken or hurt or wounded or lacking, I have great news for you today. My prayer is that the God of all love and grace would fill you to the overflowing and transform whatever in your life is going on into something amazing. He loves you today. So do I. God bless. Thanks for coming.